Hey, what's up guys, Alex here. Thank you for checking this video and welcome to another episode about Gulp. In this tutorial, we're gonna take a look on how to set up and install our browser sync option. If you don't know what browser sync is, basically it's an amazing feature of Gulp that allows the script to recognize every time we have an update in our source file, our JavaScript, CSS, PHP, and automatically reload the page without us actually reloading the page. That's super useful when you have to speed up your development process, when you want to automatically inject all the new changes that you're doing on your local files. So let's take a look on how to do it. First, as usual, let's open our terminal and let's install browser sync by typing the usual npm install browser-sync --save dev to save this package in our dev dependencies list. Let's give it the usual few seconds. Perfect. Now, if we access the package.json file and we scroll down, we have our browser sync at version 2.23.6, currently at the time of this recording. Awesome. Now, what we have to do, as usual, we have to include it in a variable that we need to call in our gulp file.js. So let's do it. Let's call this var browser sync with capital S to have like a camel case and easier to read. Let's require, like we're doing for every other package, the browser-sync package. And the browser sync has a particular option that we cannot require it just like that and then use it directly. We need to create a new instance before initialize it. So automatically we can do it directly inside the require to by concatenating with a period and then write create without specifying any option. That's perfect. So now we have this variable with a newly created instance of our browser sync. Let's scroll down and let's generate our first browser sync task in Gulp in order to automatically create this local environment, like virtual environment, local host that listens to all the files that are changing. I like to create this task before any other task, but of course you can put it whatever you want. I'm gonna create gulp.task and let's specify the name of the task, and I usually like to call it browser sync like the package, but of course you can name this task however you want. Put a comma and let's generate a nameless function, and inside this nameless function we're gonna first initialize browser sync. So we're calling our browser sync variable that we specified before. We say .init, and we could potentially just not pass any parameters here, but let's take a look at all the parameters that we can play with. So in order to specify different options and different parameters, let's open the curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, let's specify that we want the server of browser sync, open again the curly brackets after the column, to point to our base directory that it's actually this file. So let's specify the base directory by say // So we're telling to browser sync to initialize our local host in this specific directory. So where we have our index.html and all the other good stuff. That's perfect. Let's remember to put a semicolon at the end of the Gulp task. Awesome. We generated our first browser sync task. So let's initialize it now. Let's open the terminal, let's clear it up, and let's say Gulp browser-sync. That is the same name of the task that we specified here. So let's call that task and let's hit enter. There you go. You see what happened? Automatically, the browser, a new browser tab was open with a local environment, local host that we didn't actually create, but browser sync generated for us in order to be able to inspect or just be able to use it locally. We have this local host column 3000, that is the port that Gulp is using to inject the browser sync, and we have our file. So if we open our inspector and we actually refresh the page, you see this connected to browser sync little thing that it appears in the top right. This is saying that this page is connected to browser sync. So every time we inject something, we change something, automatically this page will change. If we check the elements here, and we see in our script, here we have something that we didn't write. We have this asynchronous script that is searching for the browser sync client.js at the current version. We didn't write this, but Gulp automatically is injecting this script in our page in order to connect to browser sync. And if we open again our terminal, browser sync has a bunch of different options. So first it returns this local host that you can access. You can access your website, that's perfect. You have also the option to specify or automatically have the ability to use an external URL that is just a local IP address. So basically, if you have other coworkers or someone that is connected to your same Wi-Fi, you all are on the same internet connection, those people, though your coworkers, your colleagues, can access your local host from this public URL. And this is perfect if you want to show something that you're doing without uploading the entire website on a remote server. You just want to show them temporarily and give them access to your local host, and then by just deactivating browser sync or just interrupting browser sync, they won't be able to access this URL again. Then you have the UI option, both locally or externally accessible. And the UI option, I personally never use it, but it's really interesting. And if you never use browser sync, you should give it a look. Basically, it lists all the options of browser sync, what we're returning, if there are other connections available or there are other users connected to the same thing, and you have some syncing option that you can activate, deactivate. You have all the history of all your changed files. You can check if you're actually loading any plugin. You have remote debugging, network throttling to simulate like slower connection, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of like pretty interesting. You can see the current version of your browser sync. You can generate new tab, and it's okay. I'm not a huge fan of this because I actually never use it, but if you never used browser sync before, I strongly suggest you to learn all the options that you have here because that could be really helpful. But let's continue our tutorial. So now we have this localhost column 3000 that automatically is loading everything that we need, and that's perfect. But first I want to do one thing. I don't like the fact that it's on localhost because I generated my local environment with my HTTPS //gulp.dev. I want browser sync to connect to my gulp.dev because this is really important, especially for local WordPress development or local Laravel development. When you have a CMS of a framework that needs a full URL for permalinks or routes or stuff like that, you cannot develop off of localhost column 300. You need a proper URL. So let's take a look on how to set it up properly. Let's close this tab. Let's open the terminal, and with Control-C, let's interrupt the execution or the listening of browser sync. Perfect. Let's go back in our script, in our code editor. And here first, let's remove the server. We don't want to serve it anymore from the base directory. We're going to specify other options. The first options inside the init, I want to say that I don't want to open this page whenever I initialize these browser sync because it's kind of really annoying that automatically it opens the browser tab. So I can specify as first option simply the property open set to false. Then comma, I want to say that, hey, every time I change something, inject the changes to this localhost, so set to true. And now we can specify the proxy. The proxy needs to reflect our own local URL. And my local URL is https://gulp.dev. And this could be whatever name you specify for your local host, and that's totally fine. So let me show you why this won't work. If we save it and we go back in our terminal and we trigger again Gulp browser sync, you will notice that here, yes, the proxy is https gulp.dev, but the localhost is still the same, even if it points to HTTPS. So if we try to open https gulp.dev, refresh this page, you see that we don't have this connected to Gulp, like the little notification on the top right. If we access the UI to see if it actually is connected, you will see that this page is completely empty and the version is not listed. That means that browser sync is not properly connected to our local host. And this is happening because of two main reasons. And this is really important. Be sure to understand properly because it's one of the main issues that everyone has, and I also had it for many times, for many months before understanding how to properly set it up. So first, because I'm on HTTPS, I'm on a secure connection with an SSL certificate, I need to specify where browser sync should find those certificates in order to properly return an HTTPS connection. So let me interrupt the script here. Let's go back in our code editor. And right after the proxy, we need to specify the option HTTPS And the HTTPS, we need to open the curly brackets and specify two parameters. First, we need to specify the key, where is my secure key and where is my secure certificate. Key and certificate are the common options, or like the common files that when you generate an SSL, a secure connection with HTTPS, you will get those files. If you're on localhost like me, in my case I'm on Valet, I can find those certificates inside the local installation on Valet. If you specified your localhost, if it's not HTTPS, you won't have that problem. It's gonna be like simply HTTP, it's totally fine. If you're on Laragon, if you're set up your own Apache configuration and you have an SSL certificate, you need to point the location of those certificates. In my case, my certificates are in my users directory, then the name of my user, that it's Alecat, and I'm using Laravel Valet, so the subdirectory hidden.valet, I have a directory called certificates, and then I need to specify the name of my local URL and then dot key. Same thing goes for the certificate. But instead of the key, I have to return the CRT, that stands for certificate, of course. Perfect. Now I'm passing the HTTPS stuff to browser sync saying, hey, I want to use HTTPS, so check these credentials, check these files in order to properly activate the HTTPS. Otherwise, it won't work. Awesome. Now, if we trigger again, browser sync, yes, we have the proxy HTTPS gulp.dev. If we go back in our gulp.dev and we refresh, once again, nothing happens, but we don't have any error. We don't have the triggering of the little connected to browser sync. And once again, if we access the UI to check if it's connected, it's not connected. Why is that? Well, simply because we don't have a JavaScript that is automatically connecting browser sync to the sort of like running localhost server that we have currently going on in our terminal. So, just to show you, if I go back, I interrupt this script here, go back in our code editor. If I comment these out for a second and I simply say, hey server, use once again my base directory as a server, and the base directory is // save it, I trigger once again gulp browser sync. Now it's back to the localhost here, and you can see that we have the connected to browser sync, and if we access the UI, that is 3001, browser sync is connected to our local and external and server properly. So this is happening because automatically browser sync injects that JavaScript file that I showed you before. If we open our inspector, we see elements. Here we have the script async browser sync client.js. So that's what we're missing from our gulp.dev. If we access the element, we don't have the script here. So we need to manually add it. This is an extra step that if you want to use your local development environment with a unique URL in HTTPS, you need to manually specify it. So let's copy this element. Let's go back in our script here. Let's access the index.html, and right after everything, like before the closing of the body tag, let's write script async, but unfortunately we cannot leave it like there because it won't work, it won't connect properly. And that's another issue of HTTPS. That's really annoying, it took me a lot. So first, in order to make it work, we need to specify the full URL, HTTPS :/gulp.dev, and then we need to specify the port that this gulp.dev should point to, or actually where this script is located. And the port is the unique port of browser sync, the 3000. Because by default, your localhost is probably on port 80 or 8080 or whatever other port, but not 3000. So it's not pointing exactly to the browser sync port. And also another thing that I like to do, I like to remove the version of browser sync because it's not necessary to have it. And if your browser sync updates and you're pointing to an older version, you're gonna have some problems. So just leave it to the usual currently available browser sync and you won't have problem. Let's save this. Let's go in our terminal. Let's interrupt the script. And let's go back in our Gulp file. Let's revert back what we had before with open false, inject true, our proxy, and our certificates. Perfect. Let's save it. Let's go back in our terminal. So first, before triggering Gulp, if we open our local host here, Gulp dev, and we refresh, we're gonna have a JavaScript error, of course. The JavaScript cannot get the browser sync client connection refused because this file doesn't exist. And this is totally normal if your browser sync is not activated. So don't worry if you have this error, it's totally okay. If we open our terminal and we trigger once again Gulp browser sync, now browser sync is running. If we refresh our gulp.dev, there we go. Do you see here? Again, Gulp connected to browser sync. The error message is not there anymore because this file now exists, and finally our connection is working. That's perfect. Now let's start actually using browser sync and see why it's important or why it's awesome to use it. So first, if we open our index.html and we write something like Gulp tutorial and we put 2 and we save, we go back in our localhost on a browser, nothing happened, it didn't reload. This actually should reload automatically. How can we automatically reload our page without us actually manually reloading the page? We don't want to do that. We want this injection of new stuff happening automatically. Well, we can directly communicate this to our Gulp file. Every time there's something happening, something is changed, we can reload browser sync. So let's do it. Let's go back in our terminal. Let's interrupt this script. Let's go back in our code editor, and in the gulp file.js, let's start adding some options. So right after the declaration of browser sync, let's declare a new variable called reload, and the variable reload is actually equal to browser sync dot reload. That it's an option, a built-in option of browser sync. You could potentially not specify the variable reload and just use browser sync reload, but this is pretty long to write. I like to just have a reload ready variable that I can use wherever I want, and it's easier for me to use it, but you can do whatever you want. It's totally fine. So now what we have to do, we need to connect every single task that we specify, except for the browser sync default task, to actually stream whatever thing is happening in this task. After it's completed, just stream the final result to browser sync so we can connect it to it. That's perfect. So at the end of every declaration of every task, let's pipe once again a final declaration, a final option. And the last piping that we want to do is actually calling the browser sync variable and say, hey, stream this thing inside browser sync. So we can copy all this stuff here and put it also in the JavaScript thing. That's perfect. So now we have a ready watch task that automatically triggers the default task, but then keeps Gulp up and running and watching these files. That's perfect. Let's say that after I have the watch task, I want to actually trigger, together with the default, the activation of browser sync. So let's say after the default, trigger also my browser sync task. So automatically our local server, localhost will be activated. And then every time there's a style change or a JavaScript change, I want to, after I trigger the default task of updating the style, I want to also trigger the reload option. And you can see I'm passing the reload not inside the single quote because this is not a task. This is actually the variable that I specified right here at the beginning. And let's do the same for the reload. Awesome. So let's save this. Let's go back in our terminal. Let's clean the terminal. Let's write Gulp watch. Now Gulp is going to trigger all our style, JavaScript, default, and then it's going to trigger also the browser sync. So automatically Gulp dev, our local proxying server, is up and running, and also Gulp is watching for any change. And you can see here the latest notification of browser sync is reloading the browser because we trigger this JS and style tasks, and at the end of those tasks we specify stream the browser sync. So because those files were compiled and changed, now the browsers was reloaded. So let me show you something super cool. Let me readapt a little bit the screen here. So I'm gonna have my text editor to the left, my terminal to the top right, right here, and then I'm gonna have my browser to the bottom right. Okay, so text editor, terminal, and the actual browser. If I refresh the browser, it's connected to browser sync, so I have this. Awesome. So if I access in my code editor, the source, SCSS, base variables, I know that I have these two variables with the background is CCC and the red is F5, F5. Basically are the color of the text and the background. If I want background to be black, I just 000, then I hit Control Save. Look what happened. Automatically, the terminal recognizes the styling, so compiles the styling and then pushes the reload of the browser, and the browser reloaded. I didn't have to reload the browser. So if I do exactly the same here, I put the red, actual red, F55, I save it. Script is compiled, the browser is reloaded automatically, which is fantastic. And I can keep doing this as many times as I want. I don't have to manually reload the browser every time. Automatically my Gulp browser sync will reload the page. And this is so helpful when you're developing something super long and it takes a lot of time and you have to constantly save the file and check for the changes if something is happening. Automatically having Gulp watch running in the background with browser sync connected on top will reload the page for you, which is awesome. So before concluding, I want to give you a little homework for you that I'm going to show you the results of the actual solution in the next video. But what I want you to do, I want you to extend the Gulp watch functionality to actually watch also PHP files, HTML files, all the other files that are not styles or JavaScript related in order to reload the browser, inject browser sync, all the changes in the browser itself without us doing it manually. It's gonna be pretty easy and super simple if you just copy this code and you just simply reload something. If we don't have to trigger any task, it's really straightforward. So you should be able to do it before the next lesson. So it's pretty much it for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. And if you want, you can check the support me page of my website where you can find all different ways and methods to support me, support my channel, and help me to do better videos and better tutorials for you. Thank you again, guys, and until the next lesson, as usual, happy coding!